Anger rarely begins with a shout. It begins with a shift inside the heart that often goes unnoticed. A person might feel a slight tightening in their chest, a change in their thoughts, or a restlessness that clouds their judgment. If these early signs are ignored, anger grows until it becomes something that controls rather than something that can be controlled. Allah has given each of us the ability to recognize these subtle signals long before the situation reaches a point that damages peace, relationships, and spiritual clarity. What you are about to hear is a reminder of how easily anger can reshape the heart if it is not addressed at the right moment. By understanding its stages, and by learning how to step back before emotion takes over, you protect not only your character but also your connection with Allah. This message is meant to help you see those turning points clearly so that your response is guided by wisdom rather than impulse. Anger often begins with a subtle shift that escapes immediate notice. A thought enters the mind and grows heavier with every moment it is entertained. The heart feels a slight tension that quietly alters the way one sees others and interprets situations. This early unrest is where imbalance begins. Left unchecked, it clouds the clarity that faith brings. What seems small becomes the spark that unsettles inner peace. A disturbance forms when the heart becomes crowded with assumptions and expectations. The mind starts attaching meaning to words that were never intended to offend. A glance, a tone, or a simple misunderstanding becomes fuel for frustration. In that moment, the heart loses the softness that allows it to absorb life with calmness. This shift makes reactions sharper and patience thinner. The imbalance grows silently before it erupts outward. Anger takes root when the ego begins speaking louder than humility. A person feels the need to defend pride even when no harm was intended. This internal dialogue stirs agitation, convincing the mind that a response is necessary. The heart becomes unsettled, no longer anchored by wisdom. What was once a peaceful state turns into a restless struggle. The imbalance deepens with every thought that feeds it. Anger begins disturbing a person when small irritations are held instead of released. What could fade easily becomes something rehearsed repeatedly in the mind. Each repetition strengthens the emotion until it feels justified. The heart tightens, losing its openness to compassion. Patience fades and reactions grow harsher. This quiet build-up is where the balance starts to break. The heart becomes unstable when gratitude is overshadowed by dissatisfaction. Anger finds room when a person focuses on what went wrong instead of what remains right. This shift of perspective dims the spiritual light that brings peace. The imbalance intensifies as the mind seeks faults instead of understanding. What follows is a chain of emotions that drag a person deeper into agitation. Anger emerges strongly when a person allows pain or stress to settle without seeking relief through remembrance of Allah. The heart becomes weighed down by unresolved tension. This heaviness creates a fertile ground for frustration to flourish. Without grounding, emotions gain control and push the heart off its natural balance. What begins as an emotional strain turns into a flame that spreads quickly. The balance of the heart is disrupted when one speaks before thinking. Words released in haste carry consequences that linger long after the moment has passed. Anger pushes the tongue forward while wisdom steps back. The heart, once steady, becomes unsettled by regret. This imbalance affects relationships, peace, and spiritual clarity. It serves as a reminder that silence can be a shield. Anger disturbs inner balance when expectations of others outweigh patience with their flaws. The mind creates an image of how situations should unfold, and any deviation becomes a reason for frustration. This rigid outlook leaves little space for mercy. The heart becomes hardened, forgetting that forgiveness brings ease. This is how imbalance grows quietly through unrealistic demands. The heart begins to lose its balance when a person reacts to emotions instead of understanding them. Anger rises when feelings are allowed to control decisions. This lack of awareness pushes a person into responses that harm their own peace. The imbalance deepens as the heart moves further away from calm reflection. Through this, one learns the importance of pausing before engaging. Anger disrupts the heart when trust in Allah's wisdom weakens. A person becomes frustrated by outcomes that unfold differently than imagined. This internal conflict stirs impatience and resentment. As the heart fights against what has already been decreed, peace fades. The imbalance becomes clear when calmness is replaced by agitation. It reveals the need to realign with trust and surrender. Hidden triggers often begin with small pressures that build unnoticed throughout the day. A slight disappointment, fatigue, or unspoken frustration gathers quietly beneath the surface. The heart absorbs each impact until it reaches a point where patience wears thin. These subtle layers of stress combine into a force that magnifies even the smallest disturbance. What once felt manageable suddenly becomes overwhelming. A trigger may come from unresolved emotions a person carries without acknowledging, hurt that was never addressed, expectations that were never met, or words that linger in memory. All contribute to inner heaviness. This weight influences the way one reacts to new situations. The smallest remark can awaken these buried feelings. Without realizing it, the heart responds with intensity shaped by deeper wounds. Another trigger emerges when people feel unheard or unappreciated. The sense that efforts go unnoticed creates frustration that sits quietly within. When a situation echoes that feeling, even slightly, the reaction becomes amplified. The heart responds not to the moment itself, but to the accumulation of past neglect. This emotional buildup pushes a person closer to their limits without clear warning. Triggers also appear through repeated stress that goes unmanaged. Constant responsibilities, pressure from expectations, or fears of failure can weaken emotional resilience. When a new challenge appears, the heart reacts instantly due to this internal exhaustion. The person may not recognize the connection between their stress and their emotional response. Yet these pressures play a powerful role in fueling anger. A hidden trigger may arise through comparison with others. The heart feels burdened when it constantly measures itself against external standards. This comparison breeds insecurity, and insecurity feeds irritation. When something highlights these feelings, the reaction becomes disproportionately strong. The trigger is not the moment itself, but the silent struggle within the self. Triggers can form through misunderstandings that the mind exaggerates. A look, a tone, or a brief comment can be interpreted negatively when emotions are already unsettled. The imagination fills the gaps with assumptions that intensify feelings unnecessarily. This creates tension that spills over into reactions that feel uncontrollable. The heart responds to imagined threats, not real ones. Another subtle trigger appears when a person feels overwhelmed by responsibilities. Carrying too much without rest creates emotional imbalance. Any additional pressure, even minor, becomes the point of breaking. The heart loses its softness as exhaustion tightens its grip. This makes anger easier to ignite and more difficult to control. The trigger becomes the final weight added to an already heavy load. Triggers may also arise from wounded pride. When ego feels threatened, even slightly, the reaction becomes sharp. A harmless comment may feel like an attack, and a simple correction may feel like humiliation. This sensitivity pushes the heart toward anger quickly. The true source is not the moment, but the desire to protect pride. This is a trigger many fail to recognize. A hidden trigger can emerge when a person struggles with unmet expectations. Plans that don't unfold as imagined create a quiet frustration. When another setback appears, even minor, it awakens the disappointment buried inside. The reaction reflects accumulated dissatisfaction rather than the event itself. The heart becomes reactive because it is already burdened. The most powerful trigger comes from a heart disconnected from peace. When gratitude fades and spiritual grounding weakens, emotional reactions become more intense. Lack of connection leaves the heart exposed to irritation and impatience. The smallest challenge feels enormous and anger rises quickly. Recognizing this disconnection becomes essential to regaining balance and preventing emotional limits from being crossed. Emotion becomes dominant when the heart is overwhelmed by pressure it has not processed. A person may feel a rush of frustration or hurt that clouds their ability to think clearly. Thoughts become fueled by intensity rather than understanding. Wisdom remains present, but its voice becomes faint beneath emotional noise. Decisions made in this state often lead to regret because they arise from impulse rather than clarity. When emotion rises unchecked, it pushes aside the calm reasoning that keeps actions balanced. The heart reacts faster than the mind can evaluate consequences. Words escape before they are filtered, and actions unfold before reflection settles. This imbalance creates outcomes that neither represent true character nor genuine intention. Emotion dictates behavior while wisdom waits to be heard once the storm settles. A moment of heightened emotion can distort reality. What appears small becomes exaggerated, and what is harmless is perceived as hostile. The mind interprets situations through the lens of agitation rather than truth. This distortion fuels arguments, damages relationships, and blinds a person to their own overreaction. Only when emotion fades does clarity return, revealing how misjudged the situation truly was. Emotion grows louder when the heart carries unresolved pain. Past hurts or disappointments rise quickly when triggered, silencing wisdom's guidance. The reaction becomes fueled by old wounds instead of current events. This causes the response to feel much stronger than the moment requires. The heart then struggles to separate yesterday's pain from today's reality. When emotion dominates, patience becomes the first quality to disappear. The person feels an urgency to respond, defend, or justify themselves immediately. This rush prevents thoughtful choices and extinguishes inner calm. Wisdom invites pause and reflection, but emotion demands instant expression. In this imbalance, mistakes occur that could have been avoided with a moment of restraint. Emotion speaks loudly when pride becomes involved. A person may feel the need to protect their ego rather than seek understanding. The heart reacts defensively even when the situation calls for humility. Wisdom encourages humility, calmness, and perspective, but emotion pushes toward retaliation. This creates conflict where peace could have prevailed with a softened response. When emotion takes control, it narrows focus only to what feels hurtful or offensive. The person becomes unable to see the broader picture. A misunderstanding becomes a personal attack, and a disagreement becomes a threat. Wisdom offers a wider view, reminding the heart to interpret with fairness. But when emotion dominates, everything feels magnified and urgent. Emotion becomes overpowering when fear mixes with frustration. The mind tries to protect itself, but the reaction becomes disproportionate. Wisdom would guide one to trust, patience, and thoughtful action, yet emotion insists on reacting immediately. This internal struggle reveals how easily emotion can overshadow better judgment and push a person toward choices that complicate their path. A moment of intense emotion can make the heart forget the teaching of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who encouraged calmness and self-control. Without reflection, the reaction becomes impulsive rather than intentional. Wisdom would steer one towards silence or gentleness, but emotion prefers force. Only later does the heart realize how valuable restraint would have been. When emotion speaks louder than wisdom, the outcome often leaves the heart heavy. Regret settles in once the storm passes and clarity returns. A person begins to question why they reacted so quickly and why patience felt unreachable. This reflection becomes a reminder that wisdom must be invited before emotion takes command.